All right, it is a good, it is a delight and it is a good thing to be with you in the house of the Lord. I see already people have put up their wristwatches to time me, and so you can set it to 0000, and I wish you all the best. But it is a delight to be back again, and I want to thank all of you for praying for us, and it was a very meaningful and a blessed trip. Now, you know me by now that I am not the detailed person, so if you ask me how was the trip, I'm bound to reply saying it was wonderful, praise God, and that's kind of the end of the conversation. But if you want the details, you know, Angela heads up the details department in our family. I have a chat with her and she will fill in you with all the details, the colors and the shades of things and the experiences and all of that. Now, last Sunday, we had the Beverleys provide us with a very inspirational reflection. And if you recall, they talked about the 6 sustainable initiatives which Noah will bring up for us in a moment. And you remember these. Even if you don't, just say yes and it will all be in a good place. And one of the things I was fascinated about the Beverly sharing was that these were all sustainable initiatives. They talked about the administrative aspect, the national ministry, the pastors, the financial, and then of course the spiritual, community outreach, and then the relational. And it was very inspirational, and the fact that they said this was sustainable, this was something they were pushing for and really focusing on, that really warmed my heart to know that these people were not just there just to do something for the short term, but for the long term, and they want to see an impact. They want to see a difference in the lives of people there for the long term. And one of the things that you probably captured in what the Beverleys shared was that you folk and all of us now as Fairview Church of God have played a significant role, not just over the last 1 year or 2 years, but played a significant role in what they are doing in Sri Lanka. And you've heard the stories, you've seen the changed lives, and all of you have had a part in it. And so I'd like to say that we are a responsive church. And so we begin by asking the question, what does it mean to be a responsive church? Does it mean that anytime there is a need, we respond, we take care of it, and then we move on to the next one? Is it a bit like fighting fires, where anytime there is a need presented somewhere, we are quick to rush in and then we deal with it and we are waiting for the next situation to develop for us to respond? It's a bit like whack-a-mole. You remember the kids have played whack-a-mole? Anybody remembers whack-a-mole? Noah's giving me a faint smile. Maybe he doesn't want to confess, but whack-a-mole is a fun game. You know, you have the mole heads appearing. Yes, Lakshan's played that too. I can't believe that, but good on you, mate. But whack-a-mole is where the head of the mole appears and you've got to pound the head down and you wait. But in a second or two, another head appears. So a responsive church is not like playing whack-a-mole. So what then is a responsive church? A responsive church basically has 2 dynamics at play. The first one is that a responsive church listens to the world. Not the word, but to the world. A responsive church listens to the people. Listens to the cry of the people, listens to the pain, listens to the agony. They are very sensitive to the needs of the people around. They listen to the world. The second dynamic is that they listen to God. They listen and ask, what is God wanting us to do? Needs are universal. Needs are all around us. And we are listening to those needs. We connect, we resonate with those needs. But the second dynamic is, what is God telling us? How does God want us to respond? We respond with prayer. And a responsive church, an effectively responsive church, will only be able to be in that state if they hold these 2 dynamics together. In tension, in balance. You go out of balance, you go to one extreme of becoming an insular church, Or you go to the other extreme of becoming a firefighters club. Anytime there's a need, you're jumping in, you're meeting the need, and you're waiting for the next one to come. So you need to hold these two together, and that's what a responsive church is. We listen to the world, but we also listen to what God wants us to do. Now, for my reflection today, I want to look at a passage that is a very strange passage. It's just one verse. And we ought to be thankful that my reflection is based on one verse. But you ought to be even more thankful that I didn't ask anyone to read the chapter. Because this is 1 Chronicles chapter 12. And if you remember 1 Chronicles chapter 12, it is full of jaw-breaking names. Furthermore, it sounds like this is a chapter from a war movie. You read of swords, you read of shields, you read of warriors, you read of strong men, you read of people rallying together. But I want to focus on this one verse. And what does the verse say? This is from NLT. From the tribes of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe with their relatives. All these men understood the signs of the times and knew the best course for Israel to take. Now, what does this mean? The primary context in 1 Chronicles chapter 12 is where all the tribes have come together and they have made a decision. Enough is enough. We need to move forward as a nation. We need to put our support, hold each other's hands, and move forward as a nation and support David. That's the primary context of this entire chapter. And so you will see names, you will see soldiers, you will see weapons. And in fact, if you read all the way down in chapter 12, you will see there's lots of things about food. They had fig cakes, they had all kinds of things. So looks like their fellowship purpose group at that time was pretty active because they had lots of food and lots of fellowship as well. But in verse 32, there is this little descriptor of the people of Issachar. Now, I'm not going to preach about the people of Issachar, but I want to borrow that expression. And what is that expression? What is that phrase? That the people of Issachar understood the times in which they lived, and they knew what they ought to do. Or in the NLT, they knew the best course for Israel to take. Take that word Israel and replace it with our name. Take that word Israel out and replace it with our church. And in other words, we are saying the people of this church understood their times and they knew the best course of action that they had to take. So I want to talk about these two ideas. The first one is the people of Issachar understood the times in which they lived. And that's true for us as well. We need to understand the times in which we live. We are living in very turbulent times. We are living in what we call a time warp. Time is moving at a tremendous pace. Things are changing so quickly and dramatically. There are all kinds of issues outside there. And we need to understand what is going on outside. We need to understand our times. And the second thing that we need to do is we need to know how we ought to respond. So one thing is we understand the times. We understand what exactly is going on outside, like the people of Issachar. Understanding alone is not going to help us. Just like the men, just like the people of Issachar who said, this is time for us to do something about it. We know what we ought to do. We are coming together and we are going to do this. And both, as I mentioned at the outset, are important if we are to be a responsive church. Now, I want to tell you a story about something that happened in March 1993. In March 1993, there appeared in the New York Times a picture of a little boy who was malnourished, and he was in what is part of present-day South Sudan. And he was dying, he was bent over, and he was in the final stages of his life. Very close to him was also a picture of a hooded vulture, waiting, as it were, for the boy to die so that the vulture could feed. And so there was a gentleman by the name of Kevin Carter who took this picture, and it appeared in the New York Times of March 1993. Because of this picture of the boy and the vulture, Kevin Carter became a celebrity. He won the Pulitzer Prize for feature photography in 1994. And naturally, there were TV interviews, there were radio talk shows, and they were asking him, how did you manage to do this? There were great risks involved, so on and so forth. And once when he was doing an interview and people were allowed to call in and talk to Kevin, one person called in and said, Mr. Carter, what happened to the boy? And Kevin said, I don't know what happened. And another person said, Mr. Carter, how could you have not taken that boy to safety? And Carter said, I don't know. I didn't have the time because I had a flight to catch. And one person on the radio called in and said, Mr. Carter, I put it to you that on that day, there were two vultures. One was in the picture, and the other vulture had a camera. And you know what he was saying. And so this really troubled Kevin Carter. And 4 months later, he committed suicide. Because the power of regret that he could have saved a life, he could have done something to make a difference in the life of that little boy, really ate into him, and he ended his life. And so the point I want to make is that we understand what's going on around us. But we need to ask ourselves the question, what have we done with all that we know to make a difference in the lives of people? Now, I know for years that Fairview Church of God has been very involved in global missions and local missions. We've been coming to this place. We understand the context and the culture of Don Mills and Shepherd and all the buildings. And Pastor Roger and I had a conversation, and I'm told that many of you started life here in this neighborhood. And then, of course, you moved on, and Sarah is laughing because Sarah did make a comment some weeks ago about this. This is where everybody came, and this is where life started. But then as things progressed, we moved on. But this is a community. This is a place that means so much to all of us. There are memories when we come into church, when we come into church, we see those people doing their little planting on this side. We've seen people come in. We've seen people playing on the other side. We see people walking the streets. We understand this community. But what have we done so that we can make a difference in the lives of the people around? I know that in the past much has been done, but post-pandemic we took a break. But now as we come out of post-pandemic, it's time to ask ourselves the question, this area, this community means so much to us. What is that one little thing that I can do to make a difference in the lives of the people around me? Now, I know that this evening, after our service, Juliana and the evangelism and missions team will meet. And if you're part of that team, join Juliana and discuss what are some things that we can do. We know so much. We understand salvation, what God has done for us. But what about the people around? We don't want to be like Kevin Carter, who lived in regret. We know so much. Let's do some little thing to make a difference in their lives. Now, some of you might have a strange idea, and it may not fit into the mainstream of missions, but that's okay. We've had the weirdest ideas that people have tried, and God has blessed those ideas, and the communities have been blessed. It might be something that God is burdening you. Remember the two things that we talked about: the sons, the people of Issachar. They understood the times, they understood what needed to be done. But secondly, they also knew this is what we are going to do. They were resolute about it, and they went ahead and did it. And that's the second point that I want to emphasize. You might have an idea for global missions. We are very strong on global missions. Pastor Roger has been telling me that work teams have gone out in the past. We've helped people, we've shared the gospel, we've done all kinds of things. That's wonderful. So let's hold this balance of global thinking and community local thinking as well. And so what is God telling you today? Remember, the responsive church listens to the world and listens to God. So even as I'm speaking, God the Holy Spirit may be placing a certain idea in your heart and mind, something that He wants you to try out in the community. It might be unorthodox. It might be unusual, but take it to Juliana and the team and say, you know what, I've been thinking about doing this for the community. And I'm sure Juliana will say, let's do it. Juliana believes in the Nike logo. What's the Nike slogan? Let's do it. Juliana will say, let's do it. Let's try it. Because if that's what the Lord is impressing upon your hearts to do something in the community, let's try it. I like to close with the story of a gentleman called Shiro Oguni. Shiro Oguni lives in Japan, and he has a burden for people with dementia. And he wanted to create awareness for those who are suffering from dementia, and he wanted them to be celebrated. And you know what he did? He opened the restaurant of mistaken orders. You don't believe me? After the service, Google. Don't do it during the service. He set up the restaurant for mistaken orders. And he employed all people with dementia. And it is a hit in Tokyo, Japan. But he said, this is one way I could create awareness and cause celebration of their condition, rather than them being locked away in their homes. So the people who serve are waiters. Those people who serve are people with dementia. 37% of the time, your orders were wrong. Why? People never remembered. But 99% of the customers were satisfied because the food was good, even though they got the wrong orders. And they loved the fact that they were part of something where they were making a difference in the lives of these people. So if Shiro Oguni could open up the restaurant of mistaken orders, so anybody's planning a visit to Tokyo, with my compliments, you can visit this restaurant. But don't complain, 37% possibility you might get the wrong order, but you are contributing towards a worthy cause. I tell you that story because you might be having a strange idea. You might be feeling a little odd to talk about it, but talk to me, talk to Pastor Roger, talk to Juliana, and we'll see how we can make it work. Because if that's what the Lord is telling you, we need to support you and make that a reality in this community. So may God bless the reflection of His word. We've heard about the responsive church, a church that listens to the people. And we've done that extremely well. And a church that listens to God. And now it's our turn to ask God, God, what is it that you want me as an individual, you want us as a church to do to make a difference in the lives of this community, in the community around us? May God bless the reflection of His word. I believe the worship team's coming up to sing Be Thou My Vision. And this is a modern rendition. We all know the Be Thou My Vision hymn, a very powerful hymn, and I believe it's a very appropriate hymn for us to respond to after what we've heard about being the responsive church.
Ellery and I have decided to update this